Coming soon to multiple platforms, Storm's fantasy action-adventure game The Last Worlds Cross Souls, an indie 3D title developed by Lupio Studios. The developers behind this game approached me to take a look at it, and that's what I'm doing now. There is a link to the PC demo as well as a link to their Kickstarter, which is active at the time of recording of this video, so if you really take a fancy to this one, you know what to do. With that said, however, let's get into the preview and kick off with the positives. Now, I'll just point out before we get too far into this is based upon a very early preview build. As such, certain details may well change. I'll probably have come back to this one at some point in the distant future to play the game when it's a little closer to release. With that said, let us kick off and just say that I just love how vibrant the graphics and art style are here. Yes, like I say, it's very early days, some stuff clearly isn't finished, but even still, for an indie studio, the world that The Last Worlds creates is honestly very impressive and impressively large, but I'll talk about that later. The game is bright and colourful, giving us a game world that has a colour palette that makes exploring it and seeing the world at large honestly rather inviting. This isn't an open world with a muted colour palette or one that's going for a more realistic edge. It creates a game world that is fantastical, bright, colourful, something that looks almost like a cross between something you'd expect to see in a Saturday morning cartoon crossed with an anime, and honestly, that is nice to see. Each region of the explorable map has its own tone and feel, so it doesn't feel as though you're just wandering around what is functionally the same region, though with slight visual differences. And the in-game art and visual assets are great too, and give us a good idea as to the direction this series, or rather this game, will end up taking as it's developed further. I think the gameplay here is solid as well. The Last Worlds is a title that intends to tip its cap to The Legend of Zelda and the Dragon's Quest game series. Now, I'll be honest, I've not played much of the Dragon's Quest games, but I can see the influences here, even if it is just aesthetically. And as far as the gameplay itself is concerned, it has echoes of the more recent 3D Zelda titles, but at this point feels closer to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, both in how the action itself is presented and the combat system more generally, but also with the presence of crafting and weapon degradation. Though at least in this game you have a core set of unbreakable items which you can rely upon, even if they aren't really the best that you can get, and unlike more recent Zelda titles, you can repair your equipment without having to resort to stranger or more esoteric measures. The action here flows well. Yes, the animation is a tad floaty, but hey, it's an alpha, but it still gives us a good impressive show here. The animation still is vibrant and energetic and is thrilling and is action heavy, and with all the flips and switches and flying wibbly stuff that you really love with this kind of stuff. Great. I will admit I'm not a massive fan of the combo system, as I don't really think it's that necessary, as whacking monsters with this slower, more powerful attack and just dodging and blocking is equally as effective, but hey, maybe the combo system will be developed and elaborated upon, I don't know, but nonetheless, the gameplay here is solid, as well as the combat side of things. Like I say, there's a crafting and resource gathering element here, which is decently well put together, even if I will admit I'm not the biggest fan of that kind of stuff. And the final positive that I'll say for the here and now is that this demo build has a surprisingly large game world. And I know that might seem like a weird thing to praise, but honestly, given all the demo builds I've played over the past 5 or so years, when we get to this kind of stuff, when you're playing open world games, they ultimately only offer you a very small slice of it. Here, the game world that you see is large and filled with a collection of different monsters and biomes and puzzles to see, solve and fight, and it's all presented very well. Yes, there are some sections here that are blocked off by semi-visible walls, but you can see the direction that they're looking to take this one in, and it looks brilliant. And as big as it is, there's still a charm here to be seen and to be had, with collecting resources and fighting monsters being complemented by a game world that is honestly rather interesting to see and is an interesting world to explore. And I will admit that even though I've been playing this game for a good 2 or 3 hours, there's still plenty of areas that it feels like I haven't seen yet. But with all that said, let us get into the negatives, and again, this is a very early build, and I'm going to avoid saying stuff like, oh, it's buggy, and this thing's buggy, or that thing's buggy, because These are things that have probably been patched out by the time you play your own version of this, or certainly by the time this game comes out. But with that said, I'm going to be focusing more on core gameplay points of view at this particular juncture, and I'll kick off by saying that I think the menu UI is hard to navigate. This is just a quick one to begin with, and honestly it feels closer to a bug than a feature of it, but as it currently stands, the menu UI is hard to navigate if you're using a controller. You can just switch to using a mouse for this particular section of it. You really shouldn't, but yeah, this is probably something to be fixed with time, but hey, it's better to know than not know. With that said, another issue that I have is I think the tutorial text in this game could be presented better. Yes, this is early days. Yes, the tutorial for this game when it gets closer to the release will probably be bigger, more elaborate and more involved, but as it currently stands, the game's tutorial ultimately boils down to a collection of signposts dotted around the map which explain various different quirks and nuances of the gameplay. Now in fairness, these signs do a good job. They provide you plenty of information, and the information itself is provided to in a way that is easy to read for the most part, dyslexia notwithstanding. But the big issue for me isn't so much the signs themselves, but more so how they're paced out. There are certain moments where you'll end up learning things from these signs which, to be honest, you will have figured out by the time you actually get to them. Yes, the game itself isn't mechanically complex by any means, but by the time I learned about combos, by the time I learned about the more advanced elements of the fighting and combat system, I'd already learnt about that by just doing it. Like, it was a good hour and a half before I ended up finding a sign that explained to me how combos worked. Which, yes, maybe that's fine if you just totally ignore that stuff, but by the time you get there, you'll have fought plenty of monsters and just found this stuff out just by playing it. So it's just a matter of pacing more so than it's something that is a drag on the gameplay itself. But like I say, it's very early days. This stuff probably vastly different when the game itself is finally finished. Now, my final issue is one that I will admit feels more like taste than legit criticism, but I can't say that I'm a fan of the crafting system really at all. Yes, without it at this point, there wouldn't be much to the gameplay, aside from just wandering around, solving puzzles and walloping monsters, but The Last Worlds does it in a fairly standard and uninteresting way. This crafting system is just a matter of gathering up the resources that you need and clicking a menu, and there you go, you got a weapon that makes the numbers go up and you look slightly different now. It lacks anything to make it unique, make it feel as though this is something that you really desperately have to be involved with, and it just ends up making it feel as though it's just there because it kind of needs to be there, like it's just expected for fantasy games in this particular era to have some form of crafting system. And this makes me fear that by the time the final game comes out, there are going to be areas of the game, periods in the game, where we're just going to spend great stretches of it just grinding out for resources to find that one particular item that has a very specific and very rare spawn condition just to get that thing that I need to advance the game forward. Again, this might be a taste thing, because I think I'm kind of getting a bit sick of crafting in games more generally, but at the very least, what we get here isn't much to write home about, certainly as far as how it's presented together. You make a tool, you go up to a thing, you get the thing, you click a few menus, and bish bash bosh, you got yourself a new hat. Nothing else here, nothing else more developed from that. Hopefully by the time the game comes out there's something a little bit more here to it, or at least maybe if it's still this same kind of just click on a few menus thing, maybe presented in a more exciting way. I really don't know, but hey, this might be again more of a taste thing that is more of a legitimate criticism, but nonetheless it's something to be aware of. With all that said, however, I am still looking forward to this game. The Last Worlds Cross Souls has a ton of potential with it, and it's honestly easy to see why it's done so well in its Kickstarter thus far. This is a game that is offering a fantasy adventure where you get to explore a world with your little monster companion thing who I still don't know how to properly use yet, but nonetheless offers a whole host of different gameplay opportunities, and I'll be interested to see how this one develops and goes forward. Let me know if you played this one, let me know if you're interested in this one down in the comment section down below. Thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!